Hey, what's up, Prosperity Nation? Randy Gage back with you. You've probably heard of, comedians having coffee in cars. So this is the sequel to that series. It's called Writers Whining About Resistance on Zoom.
So true.
Actually, I'm delighted to say this is another one of those episodes where I hang out with one of my coolest friends and you get to eavesdrop in, and it is the lovely and talented Stephen Pressfield, who is back for round number 2. So welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back with you, Randy. Thank you very much for having me, and we'll plunge in and do our thing here.
Yeah, and by the way, I haven't looked in the last month, but like a month or so, I was just kind of looking at the podcast episodes, and you are my number 2 downloaded episode of all time with that
Really?
last. Yeah.
Who was number 1?
Well, number 1 is the first episode where I just defined what prosperity was. And so I'm thinking people probably, if they hear about the podcast for the first time, maybe they go and listen to episode 1. I'm guessing. I don't know.
I think that's true, because I just did a little video series on Instagram, and the number 1, which was sort of the introduction, that was the one that got the most views. So I guess people like to hear what's going on, and then they lose interest after that. But
yeah, you get the tire kickers, the curiosity.
Yeah.
So, but you're up there. So,
great.
So let's start with writing in general as a skill set, because there's so many. We have thousands of people listening who wouldn't, and they have no desire to ever write a book. But I maintain, and I want to get your take on this, that I've built my whole business on the ability to write. And not just because I wrote 14 books, which is, nothing for a pro like you, but for me is a lot. But it's because I know how to write emails to clients. It's because I know how to summarize things and put them on a slide that I can organize my thoughts by, and nothing organized thoughts, I believe, like having to write them down. And I think of all the business skills, all the entrepreneurship skills, maybe being able to speak and present coherently is number 2, but I think number 1 is writing, and I'd love to hear your take on that.
I actually had never even thought about that, Randy, that in terms of, business presentation, but it's absolutely true. When somebody can really express themselves in an articulate way, and not bore you, not be blathering on about, this stuff, it's very powerful, because you say to yourself, well, this person can think, and I've found a lot of times people that I know that are doctors or lawyers are often really good writers, really clear writers, when they try to put something together, whereas politicians are the worst. They just ramble on forever. But I do think it is a great skill. If I were designing an MBA course or something like that, I would definitely have a heavy emphasis on writing, just expressing oneself clearly. You don't have to tell a story or write a novel, but be able to articulate or make a pitch, for whatever it is that you're talking about. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it seems to me like a lot of speakers are told, hey, you have to write a book. All speakers have a book. So what they do, they get a video of their keynote speech and they give it to a ghostwriter or not, maybe not even a ghostwriter, just to somebody who literally transcribes it, and they think it's a book. And then to me, like even my own speeches, right? I'm watching the audience. They can't talk to me, so I have to read their body language and what looks in their eyes. Like, oh, I don't think they got that point. I need to go back and tell it with a different story right? And when I look at the transcripts of that, which was a brilliant speech that got me a momentous standing ovation, when I see it on the page, I'm like, oh my God, I was jumping all over the place. And, I went from, A to M and then back to B, and then I jumped over to F. And if I need to turn it into a book or a blog post, it forces me to think more linear, more logical, tie together the loose ends.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a superpower. So everybody listening, if even though you never want to write a book, just know you're listening or watching one of the greatest writers America has to offer today. This guy on the screen with me. So take note.
Well, I will say one thing, Randy, that was, you're very, very kind, but, I used to work in advertising. And one of the greatest learning experiences as a writer, if you're writing a 30-second commercial, it's 2 words per second. So the maximum you can have is 60 words in a 30-second commercial, and usually less than that because you got a call to action at the end, buy Heinz ketchup or whatever it is. And so a lot of times I would bring in something to my boss, and it would be 110 words, and he'd say, get out of here and come back, when I'd go back, for like 3 hours trying to cut it down. And it's a great exercise to see how short you can cut this thing and still communicate. And in fact, I think in the world of commercials, the best commercials are maybe 15 words. Maybe there's like a 9-word start, a pause for like 20 seconds, and then a 6-word, hammered at home thing. And because the audience participates, the audience, gets into the visual of it. And anyway, it's a great exercise to learn to have to cut.
Yeah. And really for the last 2 years, at least, the biggest commercial campaigns, they write 2 or 3 or 4 30-second commercials, which they launch for a week or two, and then they're replaced by 15-second commercials, which are the highlight of the 30-second
right.
run. So if you watch Geico, Progressive, State Farm, they're the biggest advertisers in America. That's what they do. So they introduce this 30-second. Oh, it's Jake from State Farm with Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron, Jake, thanks for that Aaron Rodgers rate. There's a 30-second version of it. And that runs in the first quarter of the football game. But all the following ones in the second, third, and fourth quarter, they're 15-second versions.
Well, I know, Randy, you're a big student of commercials because to you, these are memes, right? That are being brainwashed into our skull, telling us we're worthless, we're losers, and we need to buy product X, Y, Z, to make our lives worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, and
we're probably working off of our train of thought here,
and it's such an art form now. So, I mean, like I say, the psychology behind it, it's crazy. What do you think I was listening to what's her name? Joyce
Carol Oates.
Yes, on a podcast this morning, talking about the role of energy in creativity. What do you think about that?
What did she mean by this? Was it Tim Ferriss's podcast?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that really, he brought up something in an interview he had read of hers. And I felt for years like, man, I'm never going to be successful in business if I can't get my body to keep up to my mind, because I had a lot of health challenges.
Uh-huh.
And so my whole routine for all my creativity is built around energy, right? I start with my cardio and I have my protein shake and everything before I do my writing. And I feel like that's a big component.
I see what you mean. So that's what she said that too, huh?
Yeah, she thought it was pretty big. And I'm wondering if you give any thought to that.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, my sort of day, it's changed since the COVID lockdown, but my day, used to start super early at the gym, and definitely just a total energy scenario, just trying to face whatever resistance you face when you're lifting weights and you're doing squats and stuff like that. And I definitely felt like, but when I got home, that really helped me. I didn't want to be like Proust, in bed with a quill pen.
Yeah.
I wanted to have some energy going for me. So yeah, I definitely believe it. I mean, it's in one of my favorite books is Roseanne Cash's memoir called Composed. And one of the things that she talked about as a songwriter and as a performer was that at a certain point in her career, when she really decided to really, hit on all 8 cylinders, she deliberately got herself on a training program like an athlete. And
Hmm.
I know Mick Jagger does that, before he goes on a tour, however old he is, because he's so full of energy out on stage. But yeah, definitely, I think physical energy has a lot to do with it.
That's in their rider, by the way. He has to have a runway behind the stage of so many 100 feet that he can sprint back and forth on to keep
Oh,
his energy up. And
really? I
I
didn't
saw
know that. That's,
him,
ah,
maybe, oh God, it was probably 10 years ago. So he had to be 65 or something then.
yeah,
And
yeah,
he sprinted around like a 18-year-old. I
yeah,
mean, it was
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, the guy probably weighs 115 pounds,
Soaking wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, him and Keith Richard and Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, they're the nightmare of all the people who say don't do drugs because you're gonna
Yeah,
die.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
because they just keep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting when that interview with Tim Ferriss and they were talking about writing, Joyce kept quoting Beethoven and all these musical composers when she was talking about writing. And you just brought up Roseanne Cash. What do you think? So, is that just a coincidence or is there some divine spiritual secret
I don't know. I wonder
between?
what Joyce Carol Oates meant by Beethoven, what the connection was. But
Well, she was just talking about, he was asking her like her routines and maybe the energy thing. And she'd say, well, Beethoven worked like this, whereas Mozart really worked. And it was all about the
oh, I got to
composers.
listen to that
She didn't,
podcast. Yeah.
yeah, she didn't say anything about any author or writer. They were
Ah,
all composers. And
ah,
it kind of struck me as interesting.
ah. I mean, I find myself kind of fascinated by musicians and songwriters. I'm not sure why. Maybe that seems to me more of a pure form of creativity. Maybe not. I mean, music is, it comes to you from the spheres, right? And where does a
Yeah.
melody come from? It's not like there's any logic to it. It's not like you have a concept, an academic concept. So yeah, I'm always fascinated. I love the stories about musicians. In fact, here's a great story, which did you ever see, I guess it was a documentary, History of the Eagles. Did you ever see that, Randy?
No.
No, I recommend it. It's on like Netflix or whatever. But um,
Eagles, the football team, or
no, no,
Eagles, the
no, the
bird?
Eagles, the band. And I'm blanking on the guy's name who was the lead singer for a long time.
Oh, of the Eagles, the musical group. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Eagles was, well, that wasn't Joe Walsh. We have the end, Don Henley. Who else would be, who am I thinking of? Timothy B. Schmidt was,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Uh, I can't remember his name. I see he's right in, he died just recently, tragically died way before his time. Anyway, he was telling the story that when he was a young songwriter, first starting out, he roomed with J.D. Souther, who's another great, songwriter of that era. And
yeah.
somehow they lived in an apartment that was directly over Jackson Browne's apartment. And Jackson Browne was also an unknown guy at the time. And he was saying that he could hear through their floor, which was Jackson Browne's roof, he could hear Jackson Browne playing a piano, working on a song. And he would play it all the way through and tinker with it, play it again and again and again. And he said that Jackson Browne he would make tea and he had a teapot that whistled. And the whistle, when it was ready, he would stop, and then he would go back and he would play the song again and again and again. And anyway, I can't remember this guy's name. Anyway, he said,
and I'm so mad I can't, because I read that story. I did not see this documentary. Believe me, I'm going to instantly watch it this week. But I read the story of him, whichever guy it was, living upstairs, saying, and he wrote the first verse and he played it 817 times. And then he started the second verse, and it was driving him nuts. He said, but I learned how to write songs.
He learned how to write a song. It doesn't just come out of the ether and you have it. You got to work on it, work until Jackson Browne had it exactly right. And the concept of having patience to do that over and over and over, and be driven to do it over and over. Glenn Frey.
Okay, there we go.
Glenn Frey.
Yes.
So
yes.
Anyway, it's I recommend it. History of the Eagles.
The Eagles' songwriting is so poetic. That song, "The End of the Innocents," which was Don Henley solo album, but the one about the bubble-headed bleach bonds on the set,
Dirty Laundry.
Dirty Laundry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's flat out poetry.
Yeah, I mean, all their songs are poetry.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're the dude and you hate the Eagles.
So who are your writing heroes?
Well, I just finished reading for the 10th time, "The Sun Also Rises" by Ernest Hemingway. And another one of my great heroes is Walker Percy. Are you familiar with him? Have you ever read a book called The Moviegoer?
No.
Walker Percy died. He was a Southern guy and a very illustrious family in the South. And he wrote The Moviegoer, I think, won the National Book Award in 1963. And it's kind of similar to Hemingway's writing style, and it's very lean, except it's much funnier. It's very wry and dry. But I love both those guys. Here we're talking about music. What I love about them is their styles are so musical. I mean, there's a real rhythm to a sentence, Hemingway's rhythm is different from Faulkner's rhythm or Scott Fitzgerald rhythm or Toni Morrison's rhythm. But that's a lot of what I read for, is for the rhythm of things, because everything's got to be beautiful, even if you're writing about something horrible.
Yes. So I was another, it was another Tim Ferriss. No, it wasn't. It was Brian Koppelman, the guy who's the show writer and
I love
runner for Billions, interviewed Paul Williams recently on his podcast, The Moment. And I was blown away. And one of the things they talk about was this fear of losing your edge. And I asked Victoria LeBaum, who's a mutual friend of us both. I just did a show with her the other day, and I asked her about this, and I want to get your take, because in my Mad Genius book, I talked about, my fear of quitting drugs was that I would lose my creativity. And of course, Stephen King wrote about that in On Writing when he was giving up drinking. And when you see Jerry Seinfeld and Robin Williams and Jim Carrey, you just really feel like some of that genius comes from their pain and their anguish, that's why I saw Jim Carrey in a serious movie where he played like a drug addicted son. I mean, it was brilliant. And of course, Robin Williams, the Poets Society and everything. You talk all the time about resistance. Do you think it's just resistance, or does our pain and our anguish and our drugs and alcohol, where do you come down on all of that?
It's a great question, Randy. I think that if someone was to ask me, what is the skill that you develop as a writer? How do you get to be a writer? Like for me, I wrote for years and years, like almost 30 years before I was actually published. And if you read back over my stuff that I wrote early, it is unpublishable. It's just not good, you know? But at some point, I think, I'm knocking on wood as I say this, I sort of passed a tipping point, and my stuff did become good. It was publishable. And if you ask me, what is it? What was the difference? It had to do sort of with a druggy thing, not literally drugs, but it had to do with getting your ego out of it, getting your own self-conscious out of it. And I think that, like, if you think about the phrases that we use for being drunk, hammered, smashed, blasted, pot, whatever, I believe those are really apply to the ego, that what we're doing is we're hammering the ego, or, we're blasting the ego, we're smashing the ego. And that's where that sense of I'm getting high octane juice coming through from the unconscious, because my self-consciousness is out of the way. I'm not worried about what other people are going to think about my stuff. I'm not comparing myself to Hemingway. I'm just opening the pipeline and letting it flow. So I think that I understand why being a little bit, drugged out, a little bit drunk or whatever, kind of your inhibitions go away, right? You're allowed to speak a little more clearly. But I think that in the real world, let me make an analogy to meditation. Now, I'm not a meditator. I've only sort of read about it. I don't really know what it is, but I think the whole concept of meditation is that you still yourself, you still that voice inside you, so that you do get the straight juice coming through from the deepest level of yourself. In other words, you're really doing the same thing as you might do getting drunk or getting stoned or getting loaded, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting rid of the ego. You're getting past the ego. And I think that self-consciousness might be a better word. You're getting past awareness of yourself as a person, as an ego. And I think that that's the skill that an artist learns, get back to music. I think to sit down at a keyboard or a piano and, get your own shit out of the way and just tune into whatever it is out there. Mm-hmm. So I can understand why people would worry about not drinking or not doing drugs or that kind of thing, that they might lose access to that deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. And the Mad Genius book, which you read and gave me a gorgeous
quote,
I really do feel there is such a razor thin line between genius and insanity. And we have to dance up to that.
Yeah.
Other
story. I give you a lot of credit, Randy, as being a kind of a guy that really has gone with his own mad genius. I got to take my hat off to you, and I think that most entrepreneurs or artists or something have to, at some point in their career, they have to tap into that, and they have to be able to say, like you say in Radical Rebirth, blow out those memes that are in your head and trust that insanity, that craziness,
Yeah.
And just go with it, because that's you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm maybe I crossed the line to insanity. Another story Paul Williams talked about was working with Henson and Oz on the Muppet movies and stuff. And he was saying, and then whenever I'd be talking with Henson and Oz, there would be like Kermit was in the room and Piggy was in the room, and there was like 5 or 6 of us talking. So I told the story to Victoria, who, as you know why, and she was a little upset. I think she thought Paul was denigrating those guys, like they lived in character, but he was actually saying it in a very complimentary way, I believe.
I bet,
they just had this creative genius of these characters that they developed that lived in them. And I'm wondering, do you experience any of that with these, like Telemon? We're going to tell for you guys who don't know, Steve has a new book out and it's amazing. And we're going to talk about it in a minute. But like Telemon, one of the protagonist in this has lived in your works before. Is that Is
Yes,
he
yes.
or any other character kind of having in the conversation when somebody's talking to you?
I mean, a lot of times, I mean, I really feel like characters that uh, have, I don't even want to say I wrote them, that have appeared in my stuff. To me, they're real people. You know, they're realer than a lot of real people in my real life, you know, and I, you know, I miss them, and I also would like to. A lot of times, I'll write a story. In fact, this book, A Man at Arms, it's about this character Telemon. A large part of the reason why I wrote it was I wanted to spend more time with him, and I wanted to find out who he was. I wanted to put him in scenes and have him react as if I'm watching him. You know, I'm not planning it, and so yeah, I can see that Kermit the Frog could be sitting there because he's a real personality, you know,
Yeah.
and Jim Henson is, you know, it's a part of him, but a part that he probably doesn't have access to unless he's got Kermit there, you know, doing his thing. But with Kermit there, he can tap into that right away. So yeah, I do think characters that we create or that come through us are very real to us. They're obviously parts of ourself where we wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't be having them come through us, you know?
Right. Right. The So here's a curiosity thing. You're the only person in the world who would know how to answer this question, I think. So I'm a junkie for medical shows
Uh-huh.
for whatever reason. I've always from ER, Michael Crichton, and all that. And to me, it seemed to me in my younger years when I was watching them, the theme was chasing the clock, right? The patient came in, they had a gunshot wound. If we didn't operate in the next 20 minutes, they were going to die. Or the other theme was the mystery disease.
Mm.
The patient comes in, they show these 5 really strange symptoms and they're dying, but the doctors don't know why. And then House figures out what it is, or the kid who plays the autistic doctor on The Good Doctor, Freddie Hightower, I think his name is. He plays an autistic surgeon. Um, so those were, and I love that. It's like the mystery disease is like an Agatha Christie mystery, you know, it's just,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But it seems to me when I watch the shows now that we have the mystery disease and we have the doctor being visited by his alcoholic mother for the subplot. And we have the other doctor having an affair with the nurse for the next subplot. And then we have the lady who was supposed to run the x-ray machine who chopped off her hand cutting carrots that morning. And then we have the janitor in the hospital who turns out used to be a Nazi guard at
Uh-huh.
Auschwitz. And I'm like, is this just society has changed so much and the attention span, everybody has the attention span of a gnat, and we need 6 different subplots of drama and trauma and soap opera in every episode? Or was it always that way and I just wasn't a writer and I didn't notice it? Which one do you think it is?
I don't know, really. I really don't. I've never been like a doctor show fan, but I just will say this is what I love about the way your mind works, that you're really a student of contemporary culture, you know,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
of
that's
the,
true.
you know, do you go to the doctor shows? I'm sure the fireman shows, the police, because this shit is going into our head, right? And you're right. There's a reason why it's changed. It didn't used to be like that. I really don't know what the answer is. Maybe it is the attention span is so short that we have to have all these little subplots. I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could answer it. I failed you, Randy. I don't know the answer.
Well, you did answer it in the sense that you do agree they didn't used to be so complex. So
Yes.
that's comforting for me to know, because I was like, was I just so obtuse and unaware that I didn't recognize
I mean,
all
let
of
me ask
that
you a
then?
question because I'm wondering about this in contemporary culture. My girlfriend Diana and I have just binge watched 3 times in a row Game of Thrones. all 8 seasons, right? And I'm also thinking about Breaking Bad and these other, and tell me, it seems like shows didn't used to have such gratuitous cruelty to the point of sadism, of one character torturing another, et cetera, et cetera. And I wondered, why is that? Is what, and I do think in the real culture we're getting that way too. You look about the insurrection, the Capitol, and all.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Randy? Are we getting darker and crueler?
I do think we're getting much, much darker. And I say that from the personal experience of having a crackhead shoot me and leave me for dead.
That'll do it to you.
Yeah, because in his mind, it's like, hey, if this guy's dead, he can't call the cops on me. So and he's looking for a $5 crack cocaine, $5. So he's willing to shoot me for $5. It tells you how much desensitization there has been. So, yeah, I mean, when you go back and you look at Alfred Hitchcock and those earlier works, they didn't even show that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
You thought they showed it, right?
Yeah,
when you told
yeah.
your friend afterward, you said, "Oh my God, I watched this Hitchcock movie and the guy but they didn't actually do that. They create the music and the lighting and the suspense and the dialogue. They didn't need to chop off Jamie Lannister's hand with a axe in front of you. Right?
And also when Hitchcock would do it, it was done in such a stylized way that you knew it wasn't real. This is a movie, it's Hitchcock. Well, wouldn't it be fun if somebody was stabbed in a shower, But you didn't actually, but not so in the new stuff. I mean, they're milking it for, I don't know, sadistic pleasures. I don't get it.
Well, if I don't know if you saw Tenet, the new Christopher.
No, I didn't know.
Well, you talk about, if you read Stephen Pressfield about what's the inciting incident, Nolan must have read your book and said, okay, I need an inciting incident of 15 minutes straight from second 1 to 15-minute in of the most violent, crazy, high energy, kinetic chaos and murder and, craziness. And that's how the movie launches. And it's like all of his things. I mean, it's either really brilliant that he's got such a fear into science fiction and how it is, or it's just total bullshit he made up because you can't even tell. It's like, I watched the movie and I said, this is just artistic genius, but I have no idea what I just watched.
Yeah.
Right? So there is that. I mean, it's so funny you asked that, because let me tell you 2 other things about Game of Thrones. One, I was really getting depressed and really dark and waking up every day really in a bad place. And that's not normal for me. I have fought depression, but one time it was with a medication. Other time it was just bad life choices, drugs, right? But at that point in my life, I shouldn't have been depressed. I shouldn't have been dark. And I realized it was the final season of Game of Thrones was coming up in like 5 weeks or something. So I decided to binge all the first 5 years or whatever it was before the final one. So I was watching about 3 hours a night of people getting beheaded and arms being cut off and penises being cut off and the red wedding and all that. And I realized that's what's doing it. I've been programming my mind with so much negativity 3 hours a night before I go to sleep. It's still there when I'm waking up the next morning. And I had to take like a couple
when
weeks.
you stopped watching it, did you feel better?
I did. I did. I really did. And I realized, okay, you know what? And I love it because it's brilliant work. But I realized, okay, like a lot of, like Sopranos, like The Wire, probably Breaking Bad. There are shows that are worth watching because of the brilliant writing and or the brilliant acting, but you have to ration your exposure to them, because if you do too much,
Yeah.
it really gets you.
Yeah. I'm not sure why that is. Because the heroes of those shows are bad guys,
Yeah.
they're villains.
Yeah.
And I wonder why, when did that happen, in society that, I don't
Yeah,
know.
what we call the anti-hero or the typical, I mean, that just has changed so much with those kind of shows
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
I mean, because no matter who you're, even Khaleesi, who we thought was the pure, beautiful mother of dragons, and then she turns out to be more homicidal than anybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but whether you were rooting for her or Jon Snow or Tyrion, or these were not Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a
were,
way, thinking about it, it's a little bit like the theme of Lord of the Rings, where the theme, the ring, if you one ring to rule them all, right? If you don't own this ring, you have supreme power over the world. And sort of Game of Thrones was about that too. It was like everybody was after the Iron Throne, right? It was to, and so I suppose the lesson of that is when you give into that dark side of the ambition to rule, then the next step is cruelty, sadism. You'll do anything, kill anybody, lie, do anything to achieve whatever, and then in the end, not to give away the ending if anybody hasn't seen it, they somehow try to turn it around and make it a happy ending.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do, but
yeah, I don't know if they do. So I said there's 2 Game of Thrones stories. So here's the second one. Here's my notes for my interview with you. And the question is, I have a bone to pick with you, you son of a bitch, because having just read A Man at Arms, which is Steve's new book, the bone to pick with you was, I was going to say, have you been watching too much Game of Thrones? Because I'm really pissed off at you, because you have killed off some really nice characters that I adored.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a writer who does these epic novels like you do, is there some philosophy you go by or governing measure? I mean, how, because we all
know who dies and who
want
doesn't.
happy endings, right? Nobody wants to see heroes die, but you know what? Sometimes heroes have to die for the stuff to work, right?
Yeah. I mean, almost always, was one character, Sean Coyne, my wonderful editor, and then one of the characters in A Man at Arms, I won't say any more than that, but I had him living all the way through to the end. And as Sean was like doing his edit, he says, you got to kill this character.
Really?
And I said, oh, no. And he said, no, you've got to, it's painful. The reader's going to, but it's the story just cries out for it. He just, and in so many Westerns, you usually have there's the good guy that's sort of the side, like Morgan Freeman in Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's kind of partner in that, it's like you say, oh no, does he really have to die? But in a way he does, because it sets up the final climax, but that's a really good question of who lives and who dies. Sometimes you just got to go with your instinct and go for it. But I listened to Sean, and I did,
Yeah. And, I've never met Sean, but of course I know him vicariously through you and following some of his work and the stuff you do together with him. So it's fascinating that you had, because I know the character you're talking about, I'm sure. And there's more than one, but I'm sure we're talking about the same one, that he told you, hey, he's got to die. That's fascinating.
Part of it, I think, as I'm just thinking about Randy, because there was another character that dies too. And I think what happens is, in the dynamic of the story, somehow a character that dies, somehow that character's spirit is transmuted or is transferred to another character and kind of lives again. And it's like the death of that one character strengthens another character, like, and that other character takes some action, some heroic action in the crisis of the story that that character would not have taken if this other character who was dear to them hadn't been killed. It's like, if so-and-so had to die, this is the character talking, then I've got to face up to the bad guy, you know?
Right,
Because,
right.
you know, my brother, he died, right? I've got to face up to Cersei Lannister or whatever. So I think sometimes, like, well, you know, like you say in Radical Rebirth, you know, that the old you has got to die for the new you to be born. Sometimes, you know, one character has to die for another character to achieve a level of heroism that they would not have been capable of without that character dying.
So there's kind of, this reminds me of the Force energy in Star Wars, when
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan and certain
Yeah,
characters
yeah,
die, but they live on in Force energy.
yeah.
You're kind of doing the Force energy into another character.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily even if it's literally force energy, maybe just the memory. Just, you know, we remembered how brave this first character was when he or she died. So we, the new character, have to live up to that somehow. But yeah, I definitely think, you know, I tell, there's a story when I first got out to Hollywood. One of my first jobs was working with a director named Ernie Pintoff, who used to do a lot of Kojaks and Hawaii Five-O's. He was a director of those stuff.
Uh-huh.
And we would be sitting side by side at the table working on a script. And whenever we would get stuck, he would say, have a body hit the floor. And what he meant by it, you know, kill somebody off. And we never, I don't think even Ernie knew why that worked. Just speaking as a director, he's, I guess he knew, you know, if you have a scene where, you know, Hawaii Five-O, sort of Jack Lord, you know, whatever, somebody dies, it energizes the story. And I think maybe that's why it raises the stakes in a way, because all the other characters then have to react to that, you know, either they have grief or they want to, like, one of the things in Game of Thrones that they did very well was they would have a character do something utterly despicable, like Cersei Lannister or whatever it is. And it, for you, the audience, it sort of worked because you said to yourself, I'm going to keep watching because I know she's going to get hers.
Yeah.
I know it's going to, you know, they can't let her get away with this. Some horrible, you know, the character of, what was Ramsay Bolton, that horrible guy that tortured Theon Greyjoy. You, through all the episodes, you say, this guy's got to die some horrible, horrible death. So I do think that when you kill a character off, it energizes the story because, you know, it's got to balance somehow. This, if it's an unfair, if it's a good character, you go, well, it's got to be something where they balance it somehow. The guy that killed this character is going to get his, you know, and, you know, that's storytelling.
But yeah, and with Game of Thrones, what Martin does so brilliantly is Cersei, like you, let's take your example. Cersei does some unspeakable, unconscionable, horrific thing. And you're saying, yeah, this bitch is going to get hers.
Yeah.
But 4 episodes later, you're rooting for her because she's been humanized in some way.
I don't know if that happened.
Everybody in there is a creep, you know, basically. And you end up, you like Jamie or you like Cersei or you like, you know what I mean? It was like,
it's true. They did a very good thing. Like just what you're saying, like particularly Jamie, the character of Jamie, they would have him do terrible stuff. He kills his own cousin, he, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then they would have scenes where he would really do honorable things. You know,
when
he really sacrificed.
That lady, the tall lady who became,
Brienne of Tarth.
Yeah, you never saw that coming.
And there's something true to that because we're all like that. We have bad stuff, we have good stuff. We're not all black and white. But it was smart. They would keep you sort of rooting for characters that were terrible characters.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about last time was, for you guys who don't know, Steve has this whole library of nonfiction for writers and creative people. He has a book called The War of Art, which is on the Mount Rushmore of 4 books, greatest ever for creative people to read. And so he has a big following in that. And we were talking about it last time, and you told me, I said, well, are those people buying the fiction stuff? And you told me, no, I can't get those people. They just want the nonfiction stuff. So I need to tell all you writers out there, all you artists out there, all you musicians, all you sculptors, all you artistic people of any kind, to say or act that way is so, it would be like saying you could learn how to play basketball by reading Steph Curry's book or LeBron James' book, but you weren't going to watch them play. Or you were going to, or you were going to learn how to write music by reading Glenn Fry's book instead of listening to an Eagles album or reading the lyrics that he actually wrote. Because to me, when, I can't help it now. I read your stuff and I'm like, oh my God, look at the way he handled that inciting incident. Oh, look, this is the all is lost moment. I can feel it right here. Like sometimes that's why I think a body has to hit the floor, as your friend used to say, because that helps set up that all is lost moment. And so I think to everybody listening, I got to tell you, I mean, first of all, you should read every book this guy has ever written, and you will adore them. They're so amazing. But for you creative people who want to harness unleash your creativity, this new book, it's a master class in how to write historical saga, novel, whatever we're going to call it. You just did brilliant with that.
I think I'm there are just different audiences for different things. It's interesting to me when I read like an Amazon review of, say, Gates of Fire, or a novel or something of mine, or a review of the War of Art. You can see they're completely different audiences, and a lot of I don't know, maybe one audience just doesn't like the other, but I've never been able to get any crossover in that at all.
And I could get the people who love the fiction saying, well, I don't want to read the War of Art because I'm an accountant and I'm not interested in it. But for people who read the nonfiction, like Do the Work, the War of Art, all those, not to read the fiction, it's malpractice. What else would you, I don't want to give away the book. I want everybody to buy A Man at Arms, but what do you want people to know about this book? Because I don't want to give away any plot stuff or anything. So here's your chance to talk directly. What do you want them to know about this book?
In a way, it's a really tough question. It's like, what do you think about your daughter going to Harvard? Why should she get in? I think that when I started writing fiction in the ancient world, I started with the story of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, and which to me was like sort of the purest expression of the warrior ethos, the warrior archetype, right? A battle that was for a good cause, purely defensive against overwhelming odds, right? And as I've gone through, I've written like 5 other books set in the ancient world, and each one got darker and darker and darker. And each one went from kind of like the story of the Spartans is really a collective heroism, it's the entire culture, the women of Sparta, the little girls, the whole thing. And as I've kind of gone through each book, I've narrowed it. It isn't even my own decision. It's become more an individual story. And it all sort of came down to this one character, Telemon of Arcadia, the hero a man at arms, and he's sort of, to me, the warrior archetype, the warrior ideal, carried to the point of perfection, but of a perfection that is stuck. And I think that a lot of us in our modern world, and I don't want to speak for you, Randy, but I suspect it's true of you too. We're warriors in our own mind, and we live by a sort of a code, an internal code. And in many ways, we are kind of a law unto ourselves, right? Because society is so crazy and so fractured, we've had to do that. We've had to ask ourselves, who am I? Why am I here? All that sort of stuff. And so with this character, Telemon, that I love this guy, and he's like an alter ego for me. I wanted in this book to do a book only about him and to follow his journey as this samurai, gunslinger, solitary individual in a crazy world, and see where he would go. And I knew that the answer, I'm probably doing way too much here, that the answer was going to be about love. And in his case, I don't want to give away, it's not love like romantic love. It's a connection that he has with a young, vulnerable female character in the story that he starts out going after and winds up protecting. And that was I wanted to bring this sort of saga of my mind that started with the Spartans, a collective pure warrior, all the way down to the solitary individual that's dealing with the same shit you and I are dealing with, and then finding a way to get him beyond that, to move beyond that sort of level of stuckness. And one of the reasons I shaped this book, A Man at Arms, like a Western, like an American Western. And in the sense that it's about a solitary individual that's a master of violence, like a samurai or like Clint Eastwood in The Man with No Name. It's set in the ancient world, so he's a master of sword play and stuff like that. And it's set in a landscape in the Sinai Desert, the Sinai Wilderness, that's like the American West, like a place beyond the law, where each person is a law unto themselves. And another aspect of an American Western is usually the solitary hero confronts or is forced into a union with a vulnerable character that and it sort of cracks his shell in one way or another. He's got, so that's, anyway, I'm kind of blathering on, but that's what I wanted to do with this. And it just kind of seized me at some point, and came very fast.
And you did do it with this book. So, and I'm promoting the hell out of it because my ulterior motive is I expect that this book needs to be volume 1 of the new Telemon series that you need to write. Kind of like at least a trilogy like the Bourne Identity, the Bourne whatever, Bourne Supremacy. But I could see this as like those detective genre novels where there was 15 books of this detective or this. I feel like this character you could do that with.
I'm sort of terrified when you say that. I'm terrified when you say that, Randy. I really do know. You're right. I've got to do another one, and and I have no idea what it would possibly be, because I've carried him right now. As far as I'm carrying myself in my head, I'm going to have to evolve, beyond that to do it. But thank you for saying that. I was hoping that would be the way people would respond.
Yeah. You guys get the book. By the way, I got my Spartan Warrior Mug delivered today.
Oh, great.
So
great.
Thank you for that. Is that, I'm going to put this in the show notes for you guys. I don't know how this came about, but you came across this guy who does pottery and he loves your books. And so he's got one for you guys on the YouTube channel.
I don't even remember what happened, but this young master potter's name is Joel Cherico. And somehow, whether it was his idea or my idea, there's a passage in Plutarch where he talks about the in antiquity, there was a certain type of mug that the Spartan army carried with them on campaign when they went to war. And it was because they had to drink out of rivers and streams, And the mug was designed so that if the water wasn't particularly clean, it had a kind of a concave lip that would catch the impurities. And also it had a dark interior. So if it was a little muddy, you couldn't see it. So we thought to promote a man at arms, me and Joel. So what if you were to try to remake this mug, the Spartan Kothon, it's called, Kothon, that nobody has seen in 2,000 years. And then we'll give them away, we'll have like a little contest or, and so that's what we're doing.
So it came with the Warrior Ethos book. Is that just for me, or is there some special where they get that with the mug?
That was just because the Warrior Ethos book talks about the Spartans a lot. But, so this is sort of a replica of a Spartan shield with the lambda, the Greek letter lambda that Sparta used. But in any event, I just thought it was a cool thing to have this young guy that's basically a genius guy try to do, bring back to life this mug that nobody's seen in 2,000 years.
All right, so give me a link and I'll put it in the show notes for you guys who want to get that mug, okay?
Okay, actually, I can tell you what it is. It's just my StephenPressfield.com. Oh no, wait, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I'll send you a link.
All right, and while we're talking about links, I need to know if this would work so this is going to come out on March 2nd, which is the launch day of the new book. You're doing this really cool thing right now. You've got your original 800-page manuscript that you typed probably of Gates of Fire, and you're giving away some pages of that would that be available on March 2nd when this show comes live?
It's available right now. If anybody wants to go to StephenPressfield.com.
Right, but will it be available March 2nd?
Yeah, we're going to keep it going. Yeah, we're going to keep it going.
And
actually, this idea was you and I were talking before we started about Ryan Holiday, who does the Daily Stoic and da 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 da. He's a wonderful guy, a friend of mine, and this was his idea. He gave me this idea that from this original 800-page manuscript of Gates of Fire, that there are some crazed super fans out there, and I thought they might like a signed page.
Yeah.
So we did it, and I said, we should have it. If you buy a copy of the book, you get a page. And Ryan said, no. He said, you got to buy 10 copies of the book. And I said, really, 10? He said, yep, it's got to be 10 copies. So I listened to him, and that's a thing. Thanks for bringing it up, Randy. It's cool.
All right, so I want a link for that as well, and we'll put that in the show.
All right.
For anyone who wants to get that from the original manuscript, Gates of Fire. All right, Stephen, what else can I say? I just adore you. I adore your work. I'm so excited for this new book.
Let me give a plug for Radical Rebirth, which I think is a great, a real manifesto of get rid of the old self and bring on the new. It's like have a body hit the floor, what we're talking about. And that body is you. It's your old self to make way for a new one.
Well, thanks for saying that. And yeah, I feel like it's the culmination of all my work coming together on reinventing yourself, that's where the prosperous life really lives, the ability to keep evolving toward that highest possible version of yourself. And I get not everybody's into that. There's a lot of people happy to be stuck in a mediocrity, but that's not my market. That's not your market. I think we speak to people who want to have and become more. And anyway, you're, like I say, this guy is America's greatest living writer. His work is beyond brilliant. And the new book is called A Man at Arms. We'll have links for all of this stuff in the show notes. So thanks again for hanging out. I
encourage you to take it. You were telling me to take Telemon. I'd like to see where you would go beyond this, because I think your philosophy really is, as I understand it, that we're sort of living in the matrix, and we've been programmed, and we don't know about by our parents, by advertising, by all the shit that comes into our head, and we're not even aware that we're living in this kind of dream world, and that it takes tremendous courage, like Neo in the Matrix, to take the red pill and get rid of all that stuff that's in there. And I would encourage you, because I love to hear whenever you talk about movies and you sort of, deconstruct, who the hero was, and or what you were just talking about medical shows, which I had never thought of. I would love to hear you go into more detail, in depth in another book, and particularly telling us how, by watching Dr. Kildare or Marcus Welby, we've been brainwashed in some crazy way, or whatever's going on today. Video games that are programming the shit out of young kids,
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating. Well, and Trump and MSNBC and all that stuff that it's going into our heads that we're not even aware of.
Well, it's fascinating you say that, because I have an outline for 3 books, which the overriding theme was Legend of the Ashim. Ashim being a term that's been around in many different religions and spiritual practices for advanced consciousness people. And Radical Rebirth was the first of the trilogy.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, and I encourage you to do it.
Well, I really have, and haven't up to this moment even committed to do 2 and 3. But I actually, when I wrote the table of contents for Radical Rebirth, which I wrote before the book, I always sketch out what I think it's going to be, which it never is, but it gives me something to start from. I made that the first of 3 books. In the event, I wanted to go back and pursue those other 2.
Well, I really hope you do it. And to that point here, I'm coming back, Randy. This is our friend Victoria Labalme's book, Risk Forward, which is really about being in a state that you're in right now, where, I'm thinking of this new book, of you're not quite sure exactly what it's going to be. You don't really have it, but you have to do it. And Victoria's book would say, go forward and do it.
Well, so 2 things for you guys watching. By the time you're seeing this, I have already released the interview with Victoria about that book, because that's going to come out a couple of days before this chat with Steve. So everybody check that out, because that book is brilliant. And I haven't finished it because all I got from her was for the galley, she sent me a PDF, and I hate to read books
me too. Yeah, I hate
online. So I'm waiting for the actual print one to finish it. But it's so I'm gonna keep that in mind as I read her book. And just because you say that, for you to say do another book is for like Mozart to say, write another symphony.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that you should do it, Randy. I mean, I said it unprompted, right? I had no idea that you had book number 2 and book number 3. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I can see it's a real strength of yours. It's an area that you love, and that you can't help yourself from analyzing these stories and these memes that are destructive.
Yeah, I can't help myself. And it's like I said in that book, you kind of take some of the joy out of the books you read and the TV shows you watch and the movies you watch, because you're like, okay, here's all is lost moment. Here is the, thing. And, it's like, I remember reading Harry Potter, and with Severus Snape, the bad, mean teacher. And I just knew the last book in the series, this guy's going to be a good guy. I just feel it, right? Because it was the, Darth Vader redemption. It was just a classic, time-worn tradition of, we've got this bad guy that by the final act has to redeem himself.
Yeah, it's, of course, we've all, in our generation and generations, we've seen so many stories, so many, TV shows and movies. We're even if we haven't studied them or dissected them or analyzed them, our instinct tells us, you see that terrible bad guy, he's going to come around in the end,
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, once again, it's just so delightful always to hang out with you. The book is called A Man at Arms. It's out now. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, the book is out now. Whatever you do, drop what you're doing, crawl naked over broken glass if you have to, throw a credit card at the clerk in the bookstore, get on Amazon and buy A Man at Arms, and definitely whatever pops up that this is also by Stephen Pressfield, it's a safe bet. You're going to like that too. So my
Thank you,
friend,
Randy. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the shout out. And, I'm happy to, do this anytime you want on any subject, it's great hanging out with you.
yeah,
Write those 2 books. Okay.
all right, we'll get you back for another one. For you guys listening, thank you all. Peace, love, and unicorns.